Hour number 2 of the July 4th edition of the Morning Magazine. We are quickly headed towards page number 2 of the program, and to help us do that, he's actually on the road this morning, but he is checking in by phone. Again, David Stokes checks in someplace. I think he's in the state of Tennessee right now. David Stokes with the Show Me Institute for this week's Show Me at the Lake on News Talk KRMS. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Manny. Yeah, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee this morning, and my in-laws live on a lake in East Tennessee that's a TVA lake that's got a lot of similarities to Lake of the Ozarks. And unfortunately, it's pouring rain here today, so the lake will not be getting much action on Independence Day. Unfortunately, I hope the situation is better in the Ozarks right now.
Well, we can't complain. We've got partly sunny to mostly sunny skies and a temperature of about 80 degrees. So
that sounds like it couldn't be more perfect.
Exactly. Compared to what it was last year, we won't even talk about the temperature here last year. It was sunny, but it was much warmer. So looks like it's going to be a great weekend here at the Lake of the Ozarks. And thank you, David, for joining us here on the Morning Magazine here on this July 4th edition. Want to change things up a little bit and talk about Governor Nixon and some activity or maybe some inactivity that's been happening in Jefferson City. And interestingly enough, last Friday, as we were getting ready to end the week but start the new fiscal year, which started on Monday, Governor Nixon, instead of getting out the veto pen, decided to put the kibosh on about $400 million of money out of the state of Missouri budget. Was that a surprise, David?
I think it was a surprise. It was a surprise both, I think, that he did it, but also the extent that was done. I mean, the $400 million in withholdings, which he has the power to do under constitutional authority if he claims that we're going to have a shortfall. The thing is, nobody thinks we're going to have a shortfall anywhere near that amount, and I think there's certainly arguments to be made we won't have a shortfall at all. We've got, at Show Me Institute, we have some people, such as my colleagues Patrick Ishmael and Michael Rathbone, who really cover state budget and state tax issues well. So I'd encourage your listeners to check out showmeinstitute.org and read their writings. And Patrick Ishmael wrote a great blog post the other day, and I believe it's at showmedaily.org, talking about how sort of preposterous this is, that he's claiming that because the legislature may override his veto of the tax cuts, which would be great for Missouri, by the way, that he has to withhold this $400 million. Well, the crazy part of this is that even if you take the worst estimates of the most money will cost and add in all the new spending, the worst scenario you have is maybe costing the state $200 million, and it'll probably cost us a lot less than that. So to withhold $400 million here, as Patrick Ishmael says, is really just another example of sequester-like tactics, where when faced with maybe losing a little bit of money, government makes the worst predictions that the sky is going to fall and that we'll never be able to protect our streets and designed to scare people, and it's really just politics.
And that was the immediate response, both from House Speaker Tim Jones and others in Jefferson City, that this was, again, a setup more or less for, as you've already kind of alluded to there, politics as usual, maybe taking a page out of what's happening in Washington, D.C. and bringing that to Jefferson City. But also the fact that some of this may have been in retaliation for some of the things that either the state legislature did or did not do in this particular session.
Well, Manny, those are great questions. There's probably a lot of legitimacy behind them. I'm not a day-to-day Jeff City activist, so I don't know who's paying back for what action here. I just know that when you run the numbers, withholding $400 million in spending now that's already been appropriated through the proper channels is totally unnecessary. These tax cuts, first of all, I think they're going to benefit Missouri if the legislature overrides the veto. But second of all, even if you take, as we said, the worst-case scenario, it's not going to cost the state anywhere near $400 million. So it's just a sequester-like tactic designed to say, well, we have to cut a small amount of money potentially. The sky's going to fall. And I flew here to Knoxville yesterday, and I didn't have long waits at the security lines. You know, the sky marshals and the other people protecting the planes were doing their job every time governments are forced to cut just a small amount of money for too many politicians, and of both parties, they act like it's impossible, that the public needs them more than we really do.
Well, and you look at this money as well. It's all kind of on a, I guess, really a supposition that this might happen, this could happen. We don't know for sure. The other part of the legislation that the House and Senate both passed, I mean, you're talking about an income tax cut for everyday Missourians, that something that hasn't been done in 90 years in the state of Missouri. I guess it also bears in mind here that it almost becomes a head scratcher. Why would you not want an income tax cut, especially when the Missouri economy, it's doing okay, but it's not doing great by any stretch of the imagination?
Absolutely, and we've got a lot of writings at our site from Patrick Ishmael and others, and our economists like Joe Hasling, talking about how this tax cut, which is a very small tax cut, and it's designed to respond to the large tax cuts over the state line road in Kansas that they enacted a year ago, how this small tax cut, which is being phased in over the next 5 years, and in some cases even longer, I mean, this is not going to have some dramatic negative consequence for our state. The sky's not going to fall, and I promise to stop using that term. But it's a good thing for our state, lowering our personal income tax and really reducing the corporate income tax paid for by things such as S corporations and limited liability partnerships and pass-through entities that can often be victims of double taxation. And just trying to level the playing field with the giant tax cut for these types of companies that Kansas passed a year or so ago. I mean, what we have over in Kansas City is Kansas is winning the border war. And when you fight the border war with special tax incentives for special businesses, both states lose. But when Kansas does it, what they did a year ago, and just create a general tax cut for everybody, I mean, that's got real benefits. And that's what the legislature was trying to compete against, and I think the veto was unfortunate.
We're talking with David Stokes from the Show Me Institute here on this week's edition of Show Me at the Lake on News Talk 1150 and 97.5 KRMS. Now, it's interesting to note the state is into fiscal year 2014. The budget is rolling, or at least it has been the last 3 days. But there are a lot of bills that are still sitting on Governor Jay Nixon's desk, and over the course of the last 2 weeks, he's been either vetoing or signing pieces of legislation. Two bills of note, and this goes back to an earlier edition of Show Me at the Lake. You and I spent quite a bit of time talking about the policy of the Department of Natural Resources to close beaches. Two of the bills on his desk right now would end that practice. It would change it up completely, and those remain unsigned at this time.
Well, it's my hope that he signs them, especially the better of the two, and I forget which number that is. I think these are very reasonable compromises that sort of remove the automatic. We must close all beaches in every case if we get one reading that's too high. You know, there's a room for allowing professionals in the Department of Natural Resources to not to go by just more than just the test and to say, well, we have a test, so let's post the warning signs. But really, was this high warning, was it caused by a group of ducks that quickly came in or out, or is it really something serious? And I thought the bills were proposed that just allow a little bit more discretion by the professionals in this matter and a little more individual choice. I thought these are good bills, and I hope the governor signs it.
And the other thing, I guess, that's been interesting to note is that representatives throughout the lake area that did meet with folks from the governor's office, the DNR, and I think others earlier this year, the notion was made that these should, these bills should be signed no problem. Any thought, from maybe from you as to why that hasn't happened, why we're kind of literally knocking on the door here of where a lot of these bills, if the governor doesn't take any action on them one way or another, automatically go into effect? Is that a situation of where the governor's maybe just kind of waiting and just just let this bill become law on its own?
Well, that's the famous pocket veto, and you have that at many different levels of government. And you have that when executives don't like something, but for whatever reason they're not so opposed to it that they want to defeat it. So they just let it become law without having their name to assign to it. And that's a legitimate political move. Again, it's been done. You have that at all sorts of different levels of government, that pocket veto there. And if he pocket vetoes these things and they become law without his signature, I hope I'm using the right term here. What you can do is, as you said, let it become law without a sign because you don't like it, but you don't want to stop it. And that's fine with me. The governor is vetoing lots and lots of bills now. Some of them deserved it, and many of them didn't. It certainly is going to make for an interesting veto session here in a couple weeks.
Well, and that veto session may actually, there are some that are saying that may be one of the longer veto sessions that have happened because there are so many bills that you've already kind of mentioned there that the governor has vetoed, that the legislature, as it stands right now, when you start breaking down numbers, has really a veto-proof House and Senate. So whether or not they will use it on every single bill that the governor has vetoed, that remains to be seen. But it could be a very busy time in Jefferson City.
It could be, and I think one of the fears I have is that the governor has vetoed some rather minor bills, which nonetheless did some very good things, such as a bill making it easier for doctors and nurses to come into Missouri to volunteer their services after a tragedy, even if they're unlicensed in Missouri. And that's just one example of a bad veto, but it's not a real bill that gets a lot of press, not a lot of public attention to it, even though my colleague Patrick Ishmael's been writing about it and fighting for it for years now. So I hope that these sort of minor bills that have been vetoed also get attention during veto session because some of them really deserve to be passed.
David Stokes with the Show Me Institute. Thank you so much, sir, for the time, and I'm sure we'll be discussing more of this as we get closer to the aforementioned veto session in Jefferson City. Can you give us the website for the Show Me Institute and also your contact information if folks have more questions or they'd like to see what happens there at the Show Me Institute?
Absolutely, Manny, and I hope you and all your listeners have a great 4th of July in the Lake Ozark area, and you can see everything I've talked about at Show Me Institute's website, showmeinstitute.org. They can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
David, thank you so much for the time, my friend. We'll talk with you next Thursday. Safe travel back to St. Louis, and maybe the sun will come out today in Tennessee, and you'll get to enjoy some time while you're down there.
I hope so. Thank you, buddy.
All right. David Stokes with the Show Me Institute is this morning's page number 2 of the Morning Magazine on News Talk KRMS. More of the program on the way.